Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming out tonight. So we wanted to open with a bit of an introduction and a bit of an educational segment. So be chill, continue to move around a little bit during this if you like. We want everybody to be comfortable, to have access to the elites and things, right? It's well labeled for all kinds of sensitivities. So please have that, and we will just slowly get going here. We do want to open by taking a moment to ground us through noting that this event takes place in Jojage, aka Munyang, which is an important gathering place for many First Nations that is also important to their relationality and to broader nation-to-nation relations, which teachings like the Seven Fires prophecy of the Anishinaabe can help us better understand and reflect on. We are thankful to the Kahaga for their stewardship of these lands and waters, and we encourage settlers and visitors here to engage in reflection and anti-oppressive work daily. To that end, on this slide, we share some key resources, which anyone can refer back to later when the recording of the event is posted to YouTube, or you can feel free to email me at accessibility.scapasa@gmail.com if you would like to receive access to the entire slideshow after the event. So disability is an enormous topic that within academia has its own fields, first disability studies and now critical disability studies. And that's in addition to everywhere else it can show up, which like disabled people could be anywhere. The Concordia University website has what it calls an accessibility hub pictured at the top of this page, which includes a link to its Access Center for Students with Disabilities, which is known as the ACSD. And that organization or that part of Concordia matches students with advisors who help them with academic accommodations. Concordia's Center for Interdisciplinary Studies in Society and Culture works on critical disability studies, and many of the departments and special institutes within Concordia, such as our own School of Community and Public Affairs, are doing valuable interdisciplinary work that purposefully expands inclusion and deals with intersectionality as important and valuable to society. We're not going to be able to get into a lot of educational material here tonight, but to anchor and grow knowledge, and so we can all converse a little more clearly, we want to set the stage with a few concepts and definitions. Firstly, there are several different models for understanding and working with disability. We want to contrast just a couple of them and highlight some useful ideas. So one of the most commonly known pervasive models throughout history has been the medical model of disability, which pathologizes. It views or characterizes conditions and people as medically or psychologically abnormal. Therefore, it assumes what normal is and or should be. While medical pathology is important for the treatment of suffering, medical professionals must be wary of Maslow's law of the instrument, the tendency when one has a hammer to treat every problem as if it were a nail. So the contrasting model that we're focusing on tonight is the social model of disability, which views the suffering of people who do not fit the social norm as largely being a failure of society to handle difference well. People can be born with many differences and can acquire many differences. And while some of those differences cause suffering, that can be mitigated by medical intervention. That should be an autonomous and personal choice, and support for individuals absolutely should not stop there. Rather, it is when society does not properly accommodate some of these differences that people may experience disability. They are not able to access equal opportunities and are disabled by society. So to illustrate this a little bit more, we have a really short clip produced by EDF and shared to YouTube by theinclusionclub.com that shows a glimpse of a world operating under a clip script. So it's just about a minute long.
talking in sign language. There's a like norm. So
I'm very good at descriptors, so yeah. Would you like to repeat that for a second, if you don't mind? How you described it?
oh, sorry, I just said that everyone was speaking, most people were speaking in sign language, so people who can hear were kind of confused, and then most people were in wheelchairs, so the people who are walking are like falling down and slipping. And
yeah, on the ramps and whatnot, especially in the rain. And there were some adverts shown as well, you know, that were of disabled athletes, and there were, you know, there's a boy pointing at someone that was walking without aids and that kind of thing. So it's a really interesting sort of scene. So anyway, we'll move on from that, but just wanted to show it as an interesting illustration. So though that world looks frustratingly difficult for the people it wasn't really built for, we wanted to show it because although we don't want to flip the script, it does help on the outside the box thinking. And we do want to try to encourage that kind of thinking here tonight, put the shoe on the other foot, as it were, a little bit, and also just kind of open up to possibilities. So just a little bit more information. Statistics Canada reported in 2022 that 27% of Canadians aged 15 and older, or approximately 8 million people in Canada, were living with at least one disability. So it's not just a Canadian issue by any means, but it absolutely is a huge factor in Canadian society. Although based on representation in both legacy and social media, you wouldn't necessarily know that. In the book, The Care Manifesto, the authors state, attending fully to the needs and vulnerabilities of any living thing, and thus confronting frailty, can be both challenging and exhausting. We posit that the difficulties inherent in facing frailty may be a major reason for not yet disabled people to frequently turn away from disability justice issues. But disabled and not yet disabled alike, today you all chose to turn toward the topic with a desire to see it for what it is, a fundamental human rights issue and a community care issue. And we'd like to thank you all for that. So without further ado, I would like to present our wonderful panelists for the evening. So first off, we have our moderator, Dr. Anna Krasinski. She is one of our SCPA professors here at Concordia, as well as a member of the Community Economies Research Network. She's been an activist for nearly 30 years, from the student movement to feminist and health community organizations, to direct action against capitalism and colonialism, to working with her anarchist neighbors and comrades to bring emancipatory economic and political initiatives to life. Her teaching is inspired by both her activism and her research, and often focuses on strategies for social change, economic literacy to enable people to reappropriate the economy, community organization, and direct democracy. She is the author of the book Neighborhood in Struggle, Feminist and Libertarian Stories, Editions of the Commotion, which features an interview on her trajectory as well as 6 of her best texts. Please join me in welcoming our sensitive, open-minded, and inspiring moderator, Dr. Anna.
wow, I have that biography.
And I haven't even had the pleasure of her class yet. This is just what I know about her because word gets around. So next up we have Bonnie Stevens, please wave. Yay! Bonnie is an undergrad student at Concordia with a background in sports, parks and recreation, and leisure studies, who lives with disability from MS and has a passion for finding opportunities for growth in problem solving. Bonnie is a dynamic public speaker committed to finding solutions that are in the best interest of all while fostering rapport and relationships. Everyone, please help me welcome Bonnie. So next to Anna there, we have Cynthia Bruce, who is an associate professor of music therapy and the chair of the Department of Creative Arts Therapies at Concordia. She is a blind activist, educator, and researcher specializing in disability justice and accessibility in post-secondary education. She works locally and nationally to amplify minoritized disabled voices and has collaborated with governments and organizations to advance accessibility legislation and disability rights. She also consults on equity and accessibility initiatives across Canada. Please join me in welcoming the illustrious Dr. Cynthia Bruce. Simon Hoke, who's behind me or beside me on the end here. Hi, Simon. Holds a BA in history and is currently a first-year MA student in history at Concordia. He is an advocate for the rights of people living with disabilities, drawing on his lived experience with muscular dystrophy to promote accessibility and inclusion in education and the workplace. Simon has spoken at panels and conferences on disability and employment, including Concordia's Beat the Odds initiative and national research events on neuromuscular disorders. At Concordia, he is also a member of the innovative Still Budding Club Disabled Spoonies and Friends, which offers diverse forms of support to its membership and the broader community, mostly online and occasionally in person. Beyond academia, Simon is an avid adapted sailor with l'Association Québécoise de Voile Adapté, which I probably butchered, I'm sorry, AQVA, where he also serves on the board and supports the organization's administration. Through his advocacy, public speaking, and community involvement, he works to challenge barriers and advance disability inclusion. Please join me in welcoming Simon Hope. And after experiencing sudden sight loss in 2010, our last panelist in the center there is David Demers. He dedicated his work to advancing accessibility and disability inclusion across Canada after that sudden sight loss in 2010. A Concordia University graduate in community and public affairs and philosophy, he has used both his academic background and lived experience of blindness to challenge misconceptions and promote equitable participation for blind people in society. David joined the CNIB leadership team as executive director of the Quebec division and later became president of the CNIB Frontier Accessibility, now CNIB Access Labs, a social enterprise that supports organizations in creating barrier-free, inclusive environments. Please join me in welcoming Concordia alumnus and accessibility professional David Demers. So we just have one slide showing some defining concepts for general reference that we want to leave up in case it is of help to anyone in the audience or among the panelists. And I will now turn the floor over to Anna to lead this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, everybody, and welcome, welcome.
So before we begin, I just want to situate myself briefly. I live with fibromyalgia, which is an invisible disability. And like many people in higher education, I've navigated moments where access worked well and others where it did not. So I'm really looking forward to hearing about the experiences and insights each of you are going to bring, both from lived experience and from your work in disability advocacy. So I'm going to start with sort of a question where to get us started, obviously. As someone myself who lives with an invisible disability, I know there are moments when access does work. And can make a huge difference. So maybe can you share an example of an accommodation or an accessibility practice, ideally in an educational setting, but it can also be your workplace or anywhere else, that genuinely supported you or someone you've worked with, and what made it effective?
Well, David here, I'm happy to answer that. Concordia University, the first thing that really struck me was the openness of all the staff and faculty and willingness to learn and understand my needs and how to help me. So that was the first thing that I found really welcoming and made me feel like I can do this. You know, there was a very welcoming attitude and very inclusive attitude. Then through my own self-advocacy, the Student Access Center for Students with Disabilities was very open to modifying the format, for example, to help me do an exam more easily, or to modify the way that they would prepare PDF files for me so that I could more easily find the right page, because there was a kind of a disconnect between the PDF page numbers and the actual book page numbers. And so they were always very happy to help me get through it more easily, despite all the challenges, and always open to listen and to find better ways. So that's what I think really helped me get through it all, is thanks to that willingness and openness.
Thank you, David. Do you want to continue, Cynthia?
Yeah, I can. That's okay.
Yep, should move it close to you.
Yeah, it's one of those.
Yeah.
It's interesting because I want to pick up on what David said, and I really picked up on the relationship aspect of Bonnie's the introduction of Bonnie's bio, because I think for me, what's been most successful has been less about specific accommodations, although they're really important, and I really resonate with the PDF fiasco that often is, and it still is, and the journal articles and PDF are like my nemesis. And I never ever know what the right page number is. They don't consistently put them in the same place. But I think that for me, it's always been the extent to which I perceive people as being welcoming and open rather than closed and, you know, willing to accommodate but not joyfully at all. So I think that one of the things when I became department chair, so I'll draw on a really current sort of set of circumstances. When I became department chair, I all of a sudden have to go to a ton of places I either had never been to or I never go again. Like I go to meetings and I go there once, I never go again. And I don't have the time or the headspace to learn all of these routes and memorize them. And I remember thinking, oh, great, how am I going to do this? And my department administrator just sort of looked at me. She said, well, it's my job to support the chair. And I support every chair in different ways. So this is just on the list. Like, you know, I support you by walking places with you. And I'm like, and in fact, the first deans and chairs meeting I ever went to, the dean asked me afterwards, she said, you know, how did you get here? How can we help? We could always move the meetings. And I sort of looked at her and I said, I don't think I've ever had anybody ask that question without judgment. For me, it's that, I mean, accommodations are incredibly helpful, but I also just don't expect everybody to know or to get it right the first time. Like the openness to working with me, the realization that access, like creating access isn't my job. It's not my job to create my own access. And so I think is that relational aspect that is key, because you can have 50 accommodations in place, and if that openness and sense of belonging is missing, it doesn't make up. The accommodations just don't make up for that.
Did you want to build on that?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, that I found that Concordia has been incredibly, like, there's inclusive and then there's like truly inclusive. And I found that Concordia has tried to be truly inclusive. You know, when I met with my ACSD advisor, he just said, like, so what are you struggling with? What can we do? And we had several conversations back and forth. And yeah, I just felt like I wasn't the issue. And he specifically said, you're not the issue. This, whatever is. And yeah, that was really like validating and nice to hear. Yeah.
Simon, did you have something you wanted to say?
Yeah, well, I want to add on to what everyone was saying. I think Concordia is an institution where inclusion is really important. And overall, I think like here at Concordia, while I was doing my BA, I think the way I was best accommodated was discussing with some professors some of my accommodations. For example, I fight on a computer, which helps save my muscle energy. And overall, just discussing with professors what I needed and different support. I felt that was like the most most support I received, and it was very helpful because at the same time I was also educating professors in case they have to deal with accessibility in other parts of their life.
Yeah, thank you. That's my next question is now about when accessibility breaks down. So, you know, as we know, there are successes, as we've heard, a lot about these openness and relationships, and you know, access is not your problem, it's the society's problem. Well, you didn't say that, but I'm sort of interpreting. But so many of us have experienced situations where the systems did not work. So can you recall a situation in education or any comparable setting where accessibility was not adequately addressed, and what made that situation difficult? I see you really want to go for it.
Probably a long list.
Yes. Tell me the longest part.
So the leisure sciences program is based at the Loyola campus, which is full of potholes.
Oh yeah.
A lot of potholes, there's speed bumps, there is specifically last semester, I had a class in the CC building. And for some reason, it, in all of Concordia, is like one of maybe two split level buildings. And the only like way I could get to my class was this elevator that went down the 7 steps. And my class was at 8:45, and I remember talking to my advisor because I missed the first class. I couldn't get there. And he was like, "Oh yeah, the custodians have the key to that only, and they show up at 9:30." And I was like, "All right." Semi-luckily, I am ambulatory, so I just sucked it up for the semester, and wasn't fun, but equally, some of the classrooms are just like chaotic. Just chaotic. Yeah, I think that's what I got for now. Hit the floor.
Who wants to build on that? David?
David here, definitely, like we were jokingly saying, the list can be long, and we were talking about how society kind of disables us, and we, just getting to class is a challenge, and I usually basically make it to class and be like, okay, I can rest now,
Yeah. Yeah.
but those are all the accessibility challenges that exist, but where it broke down for me, and it was like this every semester. And every semester it'd come to a point where I wondered if I'd have to drop classes or not. It's the sheer amount of time it would take to adapt books for me. And it would take weeks, and sometimes like 5-6 weeks after the semester started. And so that's unreasonable to ask someone to educate themselves in half the time of others that were not having access to material. Our biggest challenge is access to information. So what I ended up doing is purchasing my own equipment to scan my own books, and I would cut them up and scan them and take the hours it would take. I would also try to find out who my professors were for the next semester, to contact them and ask them what the book might be. And there were many challenges related to that. And so because of it, it caused a lot of stress and a lot of delays, and it was very complex just to get up and running with my books.
Yeah, that's interesting. I wonder if at the library they do that service, because I found out that they actually do it for all the PDFs now. So when I upload them all into the reserve, I just email them and I say, can you make them all accessible? And like 24 hours later, it's done.
Wow.
So I just do it for everybody. I do it for every class, irrespective of who I have in the class, right?
Right.
But
Well, I
I'm
remember jokingly saying that I never stepped foot in the library because there's not a single thing for me in it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But that is a great service if they started doing that.
For books, and hopefully they do it for books too. I'm gonna check it out.
Okay.
Did someone else want to build on this, Simon?
Yeah, so I'll add on to I have 2 points. So the first one is I had a similar experience with books in CEGEP, where since my disability is a physical disability and it's degenerative, it affects my muscles. So I needed a solution to have textbooks in an alternative format. And one semester we sent it off. It wasn't the CEGEP itself that would do the change the PDF, but they would send it to an outside organization. And I'd been doing this for 3 semesters by that point. And then I got a message saying they would only convert textbooks for people with visual impairments, but no physical disability. So I had sent my books off, waited about a month to be told, we're not gonna scan your books. So in that situation, I just kind of sucked it up and lugged around the textbooks with me. And that was the solution. But then afterwards, I bought my own equipment and started scanning it. But I think the biggest failure in accommodation that I can think of was in December of 2025. I had an exam scheduled. So I contacted the exams office and I let them know I have a conflict. I had a medical appointment where I had to sleep at the hospital. And the response from the exams office was, sorry, we can't help you. It's not work or for religious purposes, so we can't help you. So in that situation, I wrote to my advisor and I let him know, and he provided me a couple solutions, including deferral. But then I explained the issue where I was starting a master's program this winter. So in the end, I had to call around the hospital and kind of move the appointment around. In the end, I got a different appointment and was able to deal with that lack of accommodation, but it was quite, I was quite flabbergasted and kind of shocked to be told, your medical appointment's not important, too bad, and we can't help you.
Yeah, that's unacceptable. Go for it, Cynthia.
I just follow up because this is, I mean, I've had a number of shocking, the older you get, the more shocking experiences you have to put on the list, I guess, but, when I was a student, so I had the very same issue about texts, and I was a student a long time ago, and this has not changed in lots of ways, and so it did take probably 6 weeks into a term, and I remember having to send 2 copies of every book, at that time to be recorded. It's gonna date me now. But I ended up in a discussion with classmates and a professor because the workload for the course was really heavy and the students were really struggling under the workload. And so the professor said, sure, we can talk about that. Let's see what we can do. And so one of the classmates had suggested, well, could we just decide week to week what we want to read for the next week? And I said, yes, thank you. And so I'm not shy, so I will always say the things that I need to say. And I said, I really understand why we might want to look at that. The issue for me is that I need more than a week's notice to be able to get texts recorded or put in an accessible format. And the professor just stopped and looked at me and said, I will not allow you to impose your disability on it. Oh, good. So that was that incident. I didn't know it at the time, but that incident probably drove my entire doctoral research. I ended up and it really connects to the really good lead off with a positive question, because that drove me. I was certainly angry about it for a long time, and rightly so. And my doctoral research was interviewing students with disabilities about their self-advocacy experiences, because I think that we have taken up self-advocacy as this sort of bureaucracy in universities where we still make students do a lot of work and make students responsible for their own access in all kinds of ways. And we do it with faculty as well. And so it drove my entire research program. But the thing that I kept getting into with my supervisor, which was so funny, was I'd be talking about the things that I was reading and all of the barriers, and she'd just stop and look at me, just say, no, you are running the risk of no good news. And it was pivotal for my research, because it did make me dig into the things that go well, which actually taught me so much about thinking about access as relational, not just transactional, as something that we give to students. And if we put I guess my worry always is that we equate accommodation with access, and they're not the same. And one does not guarantee the other.
Yeah, that really feeds exactly perfectly into my next question. Thank you. Because we often do talk about individual accommodations, but disability justice also emphasizes removing barriers from the start in sort of a disability justice, or even radical disability, if I may, kind of perspective, And so I'm wondering if you can share examples of barrier removal or some inclusive design and education that you've experienced or that you know about that have worked well. You have any sort of ideas about that? You do?
I do, but
yeah. Go for it. You can go for it, Cynthia.
I mean, I think lots of us teach more inclusively now. We think a lot about universal design for learning, which means that we try to think ahead of the broad spectrum of diversity. Like, who do we expect in our classes? And we need to expect everyone and plan for that. But one of the most powerful things that I ever learned from a student, and it came in a journal. Like, I have students do kind of a weekly journal in my critical disability studies course. I do a course in disability equity and the therapy dilemma. And the journal for me is just dialogue. It's an opportunity to really see where students are, what they're learning, what they're kind of struggling with, where their thinking is. And one of the things that I got at the very end of the semester that really caught me off guard because I had never thought about it because I think about all of the ways I'm trying to remove barriers. And the comment that I got was, it was life-changing to be able to come into a course and not be ashamed of who I was and not be shamed for who I wasn't. And so our capacity to create a space where we're really explicit about access and about centering it. I mean, I do it to the point where I'll say to students, look, I understand that people's lives are bananas right now, or I understand that things are going to get in the way of you getting here on time, like metros stop and the ice is terrible and all of those things. And so I just want you to know that when you come in and I welcome you, I'm not doing it to single you out and shame you. I'm just really genuinely happy that you're here. And those are the kinds of things that I've learned from my students are incredibly impactful. The UDL stuff is amazing, but I'm going to do UDL and I'm still going to get something wrong. Because I am. It's just like, I'm not perfect. None of us is perfect at it. And I just say to them, if I get it wrong, just tell me, and then it's my job to correct.
That's a universal design for learning, it says on my notes.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah. So, do you have some, because you spoke about sort of the access, do you have some specific examples of like what you do? You talked about welcoming people as they come in, or do you?
So for UDL, I try to do a lot of different things. So I provide access, I try to provide resources that help people enter into concepts in varying ways. So the, First Voice blog posts, podcasts, First Voice scholarship, like I just try to provide a number of entry points. So my epic fail this term was I always post everything in two formats. So I post the PDF and I post a Word doc if they're documents that I formatted with headings and everything for navigation. So I have an accessible syllabus template that we use in our department. But and then I post a lot of just open access scholarship. I mean, everything I do is open access pretty much. So I, will post Canadian Journal of Disability Studies articles, for example. Anyway, I'll do blog posts and things, and I posted the links, and one of my students said, those readings, none of them were accessible. And I'm thinking, what are you talking about? And she said, my screen reader needs a PDF. And so I'm laughing to myself. I said, oh, because PDF is my absolute nemesis and I would never choose it. But if you use particular I use JAWS, which is a pretty high powered screen reader and specifically designed for blind users. And so, I still struggle with PDFs. So anyway, it was a quick tip that I learned this year was to hit the Google add-on print friendly.
Okay.
That? And it allows you to save a web page PDF without any of the navigation and kind of clutter and advertisements so that it's readable with the PDF readers that will only take that kind of a document. So I just try to kind of anticipate provide different pathways through particular topics. So.
Go ahead, David. I see you want to say something?
Well, I'm not sure if I'm answering the question properly here, but there's two anecdotes that come to mind. The first one is a quick one where I think about a professor who once said to me, hey, I shouldn't have given you more time. You had the best grade in the class. And I said, well, I lost my sight, not my mind.
Yeah.
But it was weird. I think it was jokingly said, but it was weird to me how, we would right away think that, that having a good grade means I maybe shouldn't have had an accommodation or something like that. But the main thing too that I remember is one time I was supposed to have a class at the Loyola campus. And in fact, the hall building was pretty much the only building I ever learned and memorized. And so I went to see my advisor and I said, I got a class at Loyola. I've never.
It's not you, David. It's he's playing on the machine behind you there.
Well, I said I've never been there before and seeking some help. And what they ended up doing was actually moving the entire classroom from Loyola to the hall building. And my first reaction was, boy, I didn't know having a disability would give me that much power. in the classroom, but at the same time, I actually felt a little saddened by that. It was removing a barrier by not removing it, but I didn't get to experience the other campus. And, you know, I felt like I was being taken away something just to accommodate me. So the barrier, you know, was kind of not really removed and it was not accommodated in a way that made me feel empowered and made me feel like I was part of the community or the campus and could, you know, use it equally. So that is something that I've always felt was a mere accommodation rather than removing a barrier.
Yeah, thank you. That was totally on par. Do either of you have something you wanted to add, maybe?
Oh, hello.
Sorry.
Yours?
Or one,
Yes, sorry. I have something similar to what David said. When in that same CC building, when I talked to my advisor, he offered to move the class. It was a giant class and there's not much room at Loyola anyway. And I was like, no, it's okay. I'll suck it up. And that's not something I want to do. That's something I can do. But if I didn't have to do that, that'd have been great. Like, just make it all
Access to the.
accessible. Like, yeah, that's what I got.
Yeah, go ahead, Simon.
I'm gonna add on to that. I think. Let me think about it.
Yeah, you guys can.
that's fun.
Let's try without the mic,
Yeah.
because that sound, I have like heightened sensibility.
Like, still feel it.
I think what I wanted to say was that,
The mic's no longer working, so you gotta project that
oh,
way.
it's not.
Beautiful.
What I wanted to say was, I think a way to remove barriers, specifically for like in my case and for others with physical disabilities, is just to make like the space more accessible. So I find some classrooms are not very accessible. There's lots of tables, lots of chairs, and I often have to rely on others to move chairs and tables around, and that's not always ideal. But I think what I've realized the most throughout my studies here is I prefer the classrooms where the tables can move, and it's easier for people then to help me move the tables around and situate me in a way that I'm comfortable, but that I'm not like taking up the whole space either. And I think that would be an example of barrier removals and just allowing disabled students access. So for example, in JMSB, you need to have a key on certain floors. And I went through the process and it's quite complicated. So I feel like that's something that can be maybe that bureaucracy can be removed as a barrier and it be made more simple for students with disabilities to request these keys to access classrooms.
What do you mean a key to access a classroom?
I think I mean, like if you go in gym and some of the floors,
Yeah.
you're on a floor, you want to take the elevator back down, you need a key to unlock the elevator.
Oh my God, for real?
Yeah, and it took me about a month to get the key.
Oh God.
All different keys all throughout too.
Yeah, bureaucracy is something, quite something, yeah. Okay, did anybody have anything else they wanted to add on that, on the barrier removal or the idea of a society that would, you know, where disability would no longer exist?
Talk about the bureaucracy for a minute.
Go ahead.
Because that is significant. So when we talk about the kind of additional labor of a disabled student or a disabled faculty member, a lot of that is about navigating the bureaucracy. A lot of that is about so you know how the nothing about us without us kind of gets taken. Do you know that phrase? It's kind of the hallmark of the disability rights movement from Charlton, and but it gets taken up in ways that kind of shift responsibility, right? So at one point, when I was taking over a particular administrative role at one point in my career, you know, I pointed out it's always going to be the PDFs that are going to get me every time. But I indicated that a lot of forms that I would need to fill out in that role were not accessible. And like, we need to remediate these forms. They're not usable, they're not accessible. And so that, and it was received quite well, but then the initial kind of comeback was, okay, well, we have a protocol in place, which I just thought, oh, no, nothing ever good comes from a protocol. And so the protocol, and it came from a good place, but it was misplaced. The protocol essentially was, you and your predecessor are gonna go through all of the forms and then tell us what needs to be remediated. I'm like, no, not my job. I need to be able to do my job, not create my own access in order to do my job. And this is not my job. And in fact, the institution is required by law to make these accessible. And it felt really risky because I'm telling my bosses this. And luckily it was incredibly well received. And they're like, wow, thank you. Can I say all the forms are fixed? No. Do I still have to point out when forms are not working? Yes, but at least the message, like, this is not my job. And so the number of hoops that we make students and faculty jump through, and I think in some ways students in particular, although I think faculty with disabilities are they just don't even perceive we're ever going to be here, right? Because we're going to kill ourselves trying to get through university. Why would we ever come back? Like, we're just not the people who occupy these positions in people's minds. And so the amount of hoops we make students jump through, the way that we kind of mobilize self-advocacy that really requires students to have all kinds of self-knowledge related to the institution they can't possibly have. And then to repeatedly prove that they have a disability. Like, the bureaucracy is about managing all of what is perceived as a potential problem in my analysis, and better scholars than me. And you don't acknowledge that.
It's true, and there's organizations that I try to get them to realize that the bureaucracy is sometimes more expensive than the accommodation. In fact, at CNIB, we made a bold decision a few years ago to no longer require proof of a vision loss to have access to our services. And we realized that it was so much more expensive to do the bureaucracy for the very few people, if no people, that would fake it, versus doing all of the work to, for our bureaucracy. And it was an incredible amount of time, and it made us a much more open organization where anybody who needs us can come.
Nice.
And yeah, I think really the bureaucracy needs to be looked at cost more.
People are not lining up for the discrimination they get when they claim disability. So
Yeah, that's amazing. That's great.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
fantastic.
Did you have something you want to add, Bud?
No, I just agree with it.
Yes. Well, maybe I can add something, because I've been interested in, obviously, in improving the accessibility of my classroom for the last few years, a lot for many years. But in the last few years, I've followed there's been workshops that have been organized by the Center for Teaching and Learning, and also by an organization that Maud Massikut, yes, is involved in. They did this workshop where they were talking about accessibility in terms of, communication. So like, I learned all about all the fonts that you should use, and like, I've eliminated almost all the fonts that I ever used, and also, not using italics and underlines, just using different sizes of fonts. And like, these are all things that are, and like, the tables, then you need to be able to move from one box to the other using the tab.
Yep.
And like, all of these things, right? I mean, that you can easily learn. And then once you've adapted your course materials, then it's accessible for anybody who needs that, or, and the description of images. And so now systematically, I'm doing that. And even in terms of like, other forms of, like sort of invisible disabilities, like different, and also neurodivergence and things in the classroom now, like the way I set up, discussions, discussions in the classroom ahead of time. I'm thinking, okay, so what do people need? People need the questions in advance. They need to, like, some people need the questions in advance because some people can't, like, go, when there's many things going on, can't actually engage in the conversation, or some people, anyway, so there's all of these things. And I feel like that's sort of creating a classroom where some of the barriers are removed. And so people can come in and then, you know, irrespective of their capacities, they can actually participate without it having to be, you know, in advocating individually all the time, you know, so, and you do learn. I
Yeah.
really appreciate too, the way that students actually share with me what they need, and then I learn from that, and but that, again, that's like asking them to do that labor, right, which is a whole other ballgame, but. Yeah, let me see here, back up to my questions here. So, we talked about that. And we also talked about that. He's already talked about several of the questions. Yeah, so maybe this question around community care. So disability justice frameworks often emphasize community care and collective responsibility, not just institutional policies. So we kind of touched on this. We talked about relationality and things, but what role can community care play in building accessible higher education environments? And what practical advice would you give to students, faculty, or staff who want to support disability justice in their own communities? I mean, you've already talked about the openness and the relationality and everything. And, but do you have anything else that you wanted to add around community care? Like,
I'll go. There's a lot to it. I mean, it definitely, there's reports that have come out, for example, that making the whole of the built environment in Canada accessible will be very expensive. So we need collective, we need institutional policies that and laws that will make it happen. But before all of that happens, and for the will for that to happen, it starts in the community. And I think the best way to do that is first of all, always thinking of things through a holistic approach. A good example is, you know, you'll go to a hotel where there's a talking elevator, but no braille on the room doors, for example. So like point of the talking elevator or vice versa. But it's thinking of things, thinking of the whole client or journey of the student, and you'll review things of that. But more importantly, it's the including people with lived experience in the design process. And I believe that's where you find true usability gaps, where you can check off all the boxes, the standards, best practices, guidelines, etc. But you'll still have some true usability gaps that only get addressed when real people use it and provide feedback. Of course, you got to walk that fine line of not the nothing for us without us principle shouldn't become, well, you tell us how to fix it,
Yeah.
you know, and so, but it has to be a participatory and collaborative design approach. And it's a new like design thinking methodology that is more holistic but where does it start again? It's by including people in the community. Like I often tell employers when they say, I don't know where to start, I say, hire someone with a disability. Start with that. You're going to learn so much. And then things will start happening from there. So, yeah, but of course, again, back to that nothing for us without us principle, you got to make sure that that one person with disability doesn't become your advisor on all things disability. You know, some people don't want that burden. I took it on myself, but not everybody wants that burden.
That's lots of interesting information there. Does somebody want to, yeah?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
just wanted to say, I think it's necessary coming from like the human relations kind of program, that it's a discussion. And I mean, I'm very lucky that people in my program want to include others. They want to understand others. But yeah, I was just it was interesting last year when I was doing a community development class, and I had this different lens that I could use for kind of helping people see, like, not through the lens of disability, because an hour doesn't mean, like, it's not the same thing. But I got to bring my wheelchair basketball program and like get some of the Concordia students to play wheelchair basketball, and they saw how hard it was, how like actually athletic it is. And I think like just empathizing is a huge necessity, I guess. Yeah.
Let's see.
Yeah.
I'm gonna add on to what everyone was saying. I think education is also a big part of this. And I think it goes hand in hand with empathy. I think we should just treat other people with respect, regardless if they have a disability or not. But I think also like educating yourself on various conditions people have. So maybe you see, so for example, I tell people I have no problem talking about my condition specifically, but somebody else with the same condition as me might not. So in that case, maybe you educate yourself. Maybe you heard the person say, I have muscular dystrophy. You educate yourself. I'll say, for example, I'm just saying muscular dystrophy. If you look muscular dystrophy up, you're gonna get like 20 different kinds. And then within that, there's gonna be subclasses. So I think education is a good point. But I also think the empathy is a big one, especially like for social events, especially for example, the Graduate History Association, they were doing like a study event and then they were gonna go to a bar. But the bar was inaccessible. So I let them know that by having it there, you're excluding people and you're not necessarily doing the exclusion on purpose. But by not accommodating the fact that maybe people who have disabilities would like to attend, whether they're in a wheelchair or they're visually impaired, if you don't take the time to think about maybe something very basic to myself, like that a door opener would be essential to open a room, kind of miss out on that and you don't get to interact with these people, maybe hear their perspective on a situation.
Yeah.
That's a big part.
Yeah, thank you. Go ahead, Cynthia.
I think one of the things that I think being a disabled faculty member really gives me opportunities to build community in my classrooms in ways that are collectively caring, in ways that, in lots of ways that I can center and lead with my own vulnerability. I mean, I am going to have access needs in the classroom. That's just the way it is. And so if I can create a learning community where we're making access needs visible is just the way we collectively work, then it seems to kind of break down a lot of the stigma. It seems to build community. It seems to help folks feel like it is a caring learning environment. It seems, and I have found as a faculty member, really interestingly, that you know, when I just say to students, hey, like I didn't get to this because something else took me longer than I anticipated, and reading just takes me longer because I'm listening. They extend the same grace to me, that like if I extend grace to them, you know, if I treat deadlines basically like guideposts that help us all plan. And so if you want to hand something in later, that's okay. Tell me just so I can plan and you can plan, but I don't want it to be about permission. My colleagues sometimes tell me I'm bananas, like you're going to end up chasing people. I said, I don't, I chase people a lot less because it's a lot less shame and a lot more about community building, about kind of collaborating to manage the learning environment. And so for me, that has been, and it took me a while to learn that and to feel comfortable with that and to like feel really good about just centering my own access needs as well. Like that doesn't decenter theirs, it actually makes space for them. And so it's been a really amazing opportunity to, I started thinking about saying modeling, but I don't even, in some ways I don't feel like it's modeling. I feel like it's just making space really explicitly for, you know, diverse ways of being and learning and communicating and kind of creating community out of that. And it feels like it can be space where that kind of care can be centered. I don't do it perfectly. I probably screw it up all the time, honestly, but I think when that's okay and that's acceptable, then we learn a lot from each other.
Yeah, I actually have an experience like this in the classroom because a number of years ago, when I started, I started at the beginning doing a roundtable around access, like what people's access needs were in the class, and I always told people they didn't have to speak out if they didn't want, but I remember one time there was one person who felt I was kind of calling them out, kind of naming their disability because they had talked to me before. And then afterwards we had a conversation about how,
you know, it's not, you gotta like just let people tell, you know, say what they need. And so I was like, well, how do we actually have this conversation as a group, you know, without actually pointing people out? And so now the way I do it is, I did research after on this, and then now the way I do it is I have small groups that at the beginning on the first day of class, where they do a whole bunch of things, and then at the end of their little group, they actually, if they want, they share what their needs are in terms of accessibility. I kind of frame it as what would make it easy for you to participate in this class. And so everyone says it if they want, right? So, and it's really incredible, all the things that come up. And then they write it on a sheet of paper, and then they go and they put it up on the wall, so they don't present it.
Yeah.
And so then I go through it with the class, because, and so no one is saying, like, you don't know who wrote what. And so I have really, and think people like have things like, I need to get up, you know, regularly in class, or I need to leave, or I need to, you know, you need to speak loudly because I can't hear well, or there's a whole bunch of things that come out. There's always like 25 things. And then, you know, and then I take photos and I put them on the Moodle, and, you know, I think I forgot this semester my classes, half my classes here, but to actually, I can't lie, but anyway, come back to it midway through to sort of, you know, remind ourselves. But I feel like it does help with like, and I speak also of my own hidden, you know, fibromyalgia in the class, and that does create, I think, a sense of empathy, and people feel more comfortable. It does create community, I think.
Yeah, and I think it helps people feel like they belong, because I think that there's just so much stigma around disability in universities, right? And so many disabled students still feel like they're just imposters in university. And so for me, it's just so important to make space for all of the different ways people engage. You know, it's funny when you mentioned the questions I had, because I do reading guides for all of my readings. And so I have basically a 3-question reading guide that helps folks navigate the reading, try and figure out what the big takeaways are. And then those are the questions that I use to generate discussion. So I do a class agenda every week so that they can see them. They're right there. You have access to them. They've had them all week. Like, I just want people to feel and know that I value them as learners.
Mm-hmm. Does anybody else want to add something before we move on to the next question? No, that's good. So this question is, I think some of you touched on it a bit, but it's around medical documentation and the necessity of that. So several of you talked about it, but it's sort of to have you discuss, you know, is it, many institutions do rely on that. Like you need to have medical documentation to have access to I don't know if that's the case here, actually, I'm curious, at Concordia. And is that, how has that process of obtaining documentation shaped your experience of access around questions of legitimacy, or with even getting like recognition from institutions? And do you think that we should, well, you mentioned that that's kind of related to your idea of just, you know, letting everyone in, but how would that function in the context of an institution? And yeah.
The mics are live again. Try speaking close to them if you can.
Hello.
There you go.
I know it's still doing the sound.
Still in the static. It's
Yeah.
back to-
You're hearing with him.
If you're here.
Can you guys hear us back there?
Okay. Yeah, I'll start. For Concordia, I was very lucky that it was relatively easy, but I know that I'm aware that when I first was diagnosed, that the reason that I was believed was because I was an athletic person that said, hey, I, you know, deadlifted this much last week and now I can't get up off a chair. But in general, I think like a diagnosis process is just fatiguing enough, and then having to constantly like prove again and again, ask for more documentation, try and figure out like what kind of accommodations you'll need to include that in the letter. It's just it's not that it's not what I came to university for, but like, yeah,
But it's
it's
not.
more work. Like, I should get grades for it.
It's more work. Sorry.
Your mic went live, it might do that.
Hello, hello, hello. Is it working?
No, but we can hear you.
Sorry, Mike.
Mine, check. No,
Oh, okay. Okay, so you-
Turn mine off.
Did you want to say something, Simon?
Yeah, I kind of want to add on Bonnie's point, like. When I started here, and it brings me back to SAGEP as well, I had to do the exact same thing. Once I left high school, my IEP was not good. I had to bring them out my medical documentation to prove that I have my condition. When I applied here at Concordia, same thing. And in my case, I was diagnosed at 6 years old, so I already have the documentation, but I'm aware that for other people, if you're waiting to get a diagnosis, whether it's for learning disabilities or for neurodivergence, if you don't have documentation, you can't receive services from the access center. So it's just an additional step for students with disabilities that we should probably not have to deal with. But that is the reality. And I feel for those that are awaiting diagnoses or in the process, because it's almost like you're not being believed that you have the condition you're getting a diagnosis for. And even in my case, yes, I was diagnosed at 6.5, but it took me about 2.5 to 3 years to get a diagnosis. Because we had doctors, I went to an orthopedic surgeon at one point that said, no, to my parents, no, there's nothing wrong with him. It's just the way he sits, no problem. And then once I got my diagnosis for muscular dystrophy, we were telling my neurologist this, and my neurologist was not very happy about that because she had other patients had the same experience, that it wasn't believed to be whatever, any medical condition, and then they were diagnosed with a medical condition. So I think kind of builds onto the model of like medical viewing disability as like a bad thing. But I also think that it's kind of problematic for an institution to be like, we need your documentation, because if not, we can't believe you and we can't accommodate you. I feel like there's ways to accommodate students awaiting diagnosis without also not allowing them to have the service. I think there needs to be a bit more of a gray area where you can give students awaiting a diagnosis or in the process of receiving it the accommodations they need.
Especially, I'm sorry, I was just gonna add, especially because, like, trying to see certain doctors or get certain tests can take, like, the waiting list. Like, I'm a patient at the neuro, and even there, waiting list for an MRI is like 9 months, and I'm already a patient there. And so, like, to an extent, like, I remember when I did a semester in winter 2018. I started having symptoms over the summer, and I tried to come back in the fall, but I was still getting diagnosed. So I couldn't come back to school because I didn't know what I needed. I didn't know what could be done, and I didn't have proof yet. And then I had to come back last year because I didn't finish.
Did the access center and were they not able to accommodate you, or because you didn't
I
have?
didn't know what accommodations
Right.
were possible. I didn't have, like, I still had the same ACSD advisor that I have now, luckily. But I didn't know what was possible. There was so much going on that I just couldn't do it.
Yeah.
Come back later. Yeah.
It can also be incredibly expensive if you're looking for a psych ed assessment and the wait lists are really long.
Yep.
It's a real financial barrier. I also wonder about I don't know if you've gotten these letters, and so this is from my former institution where I used to work. The letters here are a little bit different, but I always remember getting letters as a faculty member that sort of basically said, this is what this student is allowed to have for an accommodation. If they need something else, then, come back to us. And I finally went to them, I said, so I won't be coming back to you if my student needs something else. If they need something else, I'm going to teach them. Like, they are all my responsibility. It's my job to teach them. And they sort of looked at me and I said, well, like, you're policing them, but now you're policing me. I'm sorry, but I'm going to teach. And it sort of made it look as though I needed permission to accommodate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Which interesting, I work with a colleague in Wales who actually has to have permission to do things differently than what's in the accommodation letter. I'm like, oh,
Ah.
that is, yeah, she said if I, you know, if I have a list of accommodations that are approved, but a student really needs something, I can't do it.
That's really, well. I tell you. David, did you want to add to that? You have something you wanted to talk about?
Well, I don't have a similar experience that was shared, but what I always think about coming from Quebec is the way that we're treated once we have the documentation as well, because in Quebec, a blind person is considered to be invalid. And so I find that incredibly weird when now that I'm working, the government has no problem at all taking income tax off of my salary. But I'm invalid.
Yeah.
So I just, it makes me think about that for some reason. And how, you know, you can get the documentation was to declare that I'm seemingly invalid, which doesn't really give you a good head start in life when you consider you that way.
Mm-hmm.
Does Concordia require that, so I've never been here as a student, do you have to do it over and over again? Like in my former institution, students were having to present documentation almost every semester and go through this rigmarole every
No.
semester, and that's, so they keep it on file? Cause that, yeah.
I'm trying to remember, but I think even from CEGEP to Concordia, the file
Will it
followed.
follow you?
I think so, but I can't remember. It's been too long.
Cause in Nova Scotia, I went back when I was 43 to do my PhD, and I remember I was working and I was leaving my office and somebody said, where are you going? I said, well, I'm going to prove once again that I'm blind. Miraculous free. Miracle of I mean, I have retinitis pigmentosus, not going away, folks. I'm just like, oh. Keep, you know, they just, and I literally had to go to another physician and get the forms filled out again.
Oh, my gosh. Wow. Okay. Well, this is next question feeds right into this, invisible labor related to all of this. I mean, you have touched on it many times, and I guess, questions around, you know, emotional labor. We talked a lot about additional time. It was mentioned also briefly the physical exhaustion of it all, you know, of relating to the advocacy and to like advocating for yourself and also to implementing accessibility. And you mentioned that you weren't able to go back to school, and also I guess there was probably some exhaustion there too going on. Yeah. So like, do you want to speak to this a bit, and like how can it's like there's things we can do, you know, or
Believe people?
believe?
Crazy?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I wouldn't, if I didn't need the accommodations, then I wouldn't do all this physical, like, and emotional labor.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, I wouldn't add this extra work to my plate if I didn't need it. So just believe people. Yeah.
Don't ask for self-advocacy on the one hand, but expect that students never make you feel uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Because I think that's for me, it's a huge piece of the emotional labor that students report. I've certainly lived that myself. I'm expected to you know, be upfront to state my needs, but I have to take on everybody else's discomfort and smooth it over.
Yeah. And how do we deal with that? Do we do education, or does everyone need to be like in a classroom be educated around you know what I'm saying? Because
Yeah,
it's kind of like a tension, right? I mean, if people are feeling discomfort, then they should go do their own research.
exactly.
Right? That's the thing. That's what, like you said, Simon, earlier.
Yeah, and I think the discomfort, I think that's also a good educational tool, because I don't think
Yeah.
everybody, there's gonna be situations where you're not comfortable, and I think it's good that it might get people to think like, oh, this is making me uncomfortable, but I've never thought of how do they get here? How do we maybe they need help going to the washroom, all kinds of stuff. And I think that discomfort is good to help educate people who maybe don't have a loved one or family member, whatever, with a disability. And I think it's that discomfort is important in helping to educate people and realize the lived realities of individuals with disabilities, whether it's physical, learning disability, intellectual, visual impairment, whatever it be. I think that discomfort is important.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I was just gonna say, I don't get this as much, I don't get it from the staff because legally they're not allowed, but like students might come up to me and be like, never said a word to me at all, and be like, well, what happened? Are you okay? I'm like, same stuff, different day. Like, just yeah, learning how to like, humanize disabled people.
Hmm.
I think people really just need to engage with people's stories. Like there's so many stories out, the Disability Visibility podcast has a zillion, like probably well over 100 podcast episodes that help you kind of lean into that. And Angus has this set of blog posts around it. It made me think about access intimacy and forced intimacy and all the ways that people think they're entitled to these really private details of your life. Because you use a white cane or a wheelchair.
Right.
But I just think people need to really access those lived experiences and understand what we're living, and don't expect us to teach them.
Mhm.
It's out there.
Right, so instead of like asking you, like, listen to the podcast.
Yeah.
And then when you're friends, maybe you'll want to share.
Yeah.
Your own story.
Exactly.
Like
Yeah.
friends, once you get there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly, once
Yeah.
you're friends.
Yeah.
Right.
Uh-huh, that's, yep.
I think that the way that the system is designed, though, there's extreme systemic issues or discrimination, or call it what you will, and those need to be addressed somehow. Because not my train of thought here, but it's the environments that make us disabled in a sense, and so I think there's different maturity levels, is what I wanted to say about the way that organizations are in terms of accessibility and inclusion, and it's the way that the systems are made right now that make it all very reactionary. You have a disability, will react this way with this accommodation, where it's not part of it's not, there's no understanding, there's no proaction, and it's not part of the culture. And so those are the different stages in the maturity levels of an organization's or a municipality or whatnot, a community's accessibility. And so it's striving to make it more part of the culture that will take down those systemic barriers. If the built environment was fully accessible and I could navigate it in it myself, there would be less accommodations needed, for example, or, if the bookstore would have a policy of only accessible books make it through their door. Now that would be hard because there's less than 5% of books out there that are accessible. But if there was more ingraining it in the culture, then there wouldn't have to be that reactionary approach.
Mm-hmm. Well, maybe we can finish on this question around that sort of making our cities or making our towns, into spaces that, well, radical disability spaces. I don't know. I want to use that word because the kind of space where there is no disability, because it's all organized in a way that allows every person, irrespective of their capacity, to actually navigate the space and to be in it. Like, do you know if there's any? I mean, is there activism around this in Montreal or in?
I mean, they're still building inaccessible homes. They're still building like 3-story apartment buildings with no elevators. So I didn't even know that was a thing. That sounds like a fantasy.
Yeah, Wither's book, Radical Disability, it's incredible. When I was in a workshop with them like 20 years ago, and I remember I just was like, after because I had never heard of that idea, that but the whole book is about that, and also the movements around radical disability. But do you know about in Montreal? Is there any organizations working on this? You're in an organization that's sort of working on this. You want to tell us a bit about what you guys are doing in terms of trying to get the city to do things differently, or the state,
Absolutely.
or?
I think CNIB focuses especially on advocacy and public education and, awareness campaigns. And, we even got the mayor to put on a blindfold and take the bus with us and got,
Oh, yeah.
still haven't been much improvements to the transit system after that. But, we do a lot of that. I sometimes am activist at heart, and I wish the CNIB were a little more activist at times, because it's time for us to stop being apologetic and really demand change in terms of the community that I represent. But there are some activist groups in Quebec, in Montreal, but sometimes it breaks my heart to hear things like when we talk to the city and they say, well, it's old infrastructure in Montreal. It's hard to adapt and all that. And then I say, you should go take a look at Victoria. It's still a very old city, the old Victoria, and they adapted every single building is wheelchair accessible and so on. So I think it's also a question of mentality, but there certainly are groups that are more militant than others, like the Réplique is a very big one. And but yeah, I think it's kind of like advertising, you can put millions and millions of dollars into it and you still have to keep, there's Coca-Cola is still one of the companies that still spends the most on advertising, even though it's the world's most well-known brand. So, there's always more work to be done when it's public education. And I think sometimes activism is needed to really bring that change to a point where it becomes a little uncomfortable and we have to talk about it.
Does anyone else here have experience or know about stuff that's going on? Or?
I guess I can talk about the public transit system. So for example, the metro is still majoritarily inaccessible. So for example, I live on the South Shore. The closest metro station to me is the Longueuil Metro. Longueuil Metro is completely inaccessible.
They just
So
rebuilt it.
anybody, yeah, and we're in the process of they're slowly building each station and redoing it. But I think a tactic that would help maybe encourage it is if everyone, including non-disabled people, actually like push the STM and the city of Montreal to promote accessibility. And I'm not saying paratransit is a horrible service. It's a very good service where they come to your door-to-door service. You get picked up at home, dropped off at school or work. But there's aspects that could be made to improve the public transit system so that people in the greater Montreal area can travel from the South Shore to Laval, no problem, get off, transfer to the REM and be able to get off. And I think like Réplique is an organization that has done that. I know in the past they've done various initiatives and protests to try to put pressure on these organizations to change, but I think it kind of, my opinion, seems to be just revolving. Like activists will talk about the issues, representatives of the organization, cities, like we hear that, yes, we'll invest, and then we hear, oh, we're cutting accessibility, and then the cycle repeats itself and the activists have to get back involved and repeat the same arguments over and over and over.
Yeah, I mean, there's metros that have, like, there's some metros that have elevators, but some don't.
Yeah, like
So it's like ridiculous. Like if you get in on one and then suddenly you can't get out at the one you need, or it's like. It's like,
I think it's working.
Yeah.
You know, I was working.
surprised.
Brought up in Longueuil Metro, they just rebuilt the whole thing, no elevators.
Oh, recently built.
I heard that they were I heard they were supposed to start work and they started on the Montreal side, but I forget what the STM's statistic is, but it's supposed to be like the metro is going to be accessible by like 2050 or something. It's unrealistic and it's not going to happen.
No accountability mechanism.
Yeah, exactly.
So, right, so the Quebec, to my knowledge, doesn't even have, we're not even close to thinking about its legislation, right? So I moved here in 2022 from Nova Scotia. And so we had passed accessibility legislation in 2017, and like, it's not perfect. It won't ever be perfect, but you at least have something by which you can try to hold government and organizations accountable. There's nothing here to hold
Really?
people accountable. the only legislation in Quebec,
Mm-hmm.
has to do with web content, I think.
Okay.
Accessibility of web content, but otherwise there's no. And we might now be the only province who either doesn't have it or is on the way to having it.
And I mean, there is the Human Rights Commission in Quebec, but it's a very lengthy and difficult process to make a complaint. And there has to have been truly no accommodation provided. So many times you have no recourse and it just keeps happening and happening, you know, and in fact, I look forward to hopefully human rights legislation will be updated so that you can actually make complaints about future barriers. It doesn't have to be one that's actually caused a problem for you, but that you can make complaints about potential future barriers because they're everywhere.
Mm-hmm. Wow, thank you so much for this. Is there anything you wanted to add before we open it up to the Q&A or anything? Last word?
Right?
Okay. Okay, so if anybody has any questions or comments from, you're doing questions with
Yeah, we allowed some anonymous questions, so we're just gonna gather from anyone that wants
good.
to.
Is that how we're gonna just do it that way by no hand
If
lifting?
anyone wants to raise a hand. I'm trying to be multimodal.
Yes, go ahead.
I was just curious, you had mentioned something regarding Quebec and taxes. Is it similar in the same provinces or the provinces are more open-minded?
I think it was kind of a joke. It wasn't a joke. It was like a sarcastic comment about how he's considered an invalid on one hand, and on the other hand, the government takes his taxes.
Okay.
You know, I think it was more just a.
If you're curious about, I'm not exactly sure what question you have, but there are income tax deductions for people in different provinces if you have a disability, which you have to reapprove every 7 years, I think.
As well.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Are you doing it?
you can, if you'd like. Yeah.
I'm gonna just take a minute to look at the questions.
We also
If you have a question, you can go ahead.
How does media and cultural narratives shape the way society?
How does the media and?
How does the media and cultural narratives shape the way society understands disability?
How does the media and cultural narrative shape the way society how we understand it?
There's a whole.
Panel in itself.
All night into it.
So you guys can answer this question while I try to read these questions here.
Well, I mean, oh boy. I mean, one of the, I think the media and culture in general plays a massive role in shaping largely, I would say, either deficit narratives of disability or kind of what I call the super crip or the super blind, right? So the heroic overcoming stories that or Stella Young would call it the inspiration porn, right? That's for everybody else's benefit. She was an Australian activist, and she's got a great video on kind of talking about the social model, but all of the ways that we are set up as inspiring for the benefit of other people. And so much of what you tend to see in the media kind of falls into those kind of domains. And I don't know, I mean, in the general media, I don't see a lot of, maybe we're getting more, but not tons of portrayal of everyday disabled people living everyday lives and doing the things that people do. You know, being married, having kids, having a job. People are still stunned that I have kids. Right? And then I, didn't kill them along the way or drop them. I mean, people are shocked.
Oh my God. We could do a news story on that. Yeah.
I haven't taken any of their classes, so bear with me, but I think it's also important that, like, for me, in terms of media as like consumable media, like TV, radio, sure, I can find some podcasts, but as Apple said before, like about approximately 1 in 4 Canadians over 15 identify as having some kind of disability, but the media kind of seems like we're just like scattered everywhere, like we're not really there, if that makes sense. So it kind of makes it seem like you're alone-ish, but like clearly we're not.
Yep,
That makes any sense.
that's a lot of sense.
Simon, did you want to add
Yeah,
something?
I think I would add, like, I think representation in the media is important because if you, a lot of times, for example, in movies, you'll have somebody playing a disability. So I can give you as an example, Netflix, they had a film called The Fundamentals of Caring. It's based off of a book. The character has the same type of muscular dystrophy as me, but they had a non-disabled actor portraying this character.
Yeah.
So yes, you're portraying a condition that affects people, but you're using somebody who doesn't have the condition to portray the character. I understand that's the point of acting, but they could have got somebody that was already in a wheelchair to play that character.
Yeah.
A better example would be there was a show called Speechless, and the character had cerebral palsy, and they had an actor that had cerebral palsy play the character.
Yeah.
So in that sense, it's there has been some improvements, but there's still a lot that needs to be done. So for example, in Canada, there's one media station I can think of called Accessible Media Inc. They have both a francophone and an anglophone channel, and a lot of their shows deal with disability, whether it's like a reality show or like following people that are Paralympians or different types of athletes and just following them in their day-to-day life. And I think the good thing about that is that they started sharing some of their content with the CBC. So then CBC plays it and Radio Canada plays it. So I think there has been some improvement, but I think there's still quite a bit that needs to be done to include disabled people in the media and portray us accurately.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
And if we are portrayed, it's like such a big part of the story. It's not just like oh, this happens to be. It's like
Yeah.
the main point of the entire plot.
Right.
Right,
Not just
or
like-
it's about how heroic the people are who
100%.
live with us,
Mhm.
right? The people who might care for us or live with
Mhm.
us, right? So the
Feeling
story
like-
becomes about them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There definitely is a lot of ableism in media, and I think, you know, everything everyone said and the whole master's thesis or book could be written on the topic. But I can tell you that in dealing with media corporations and trying to get more audio description in the content, they will fight it as much as they can because it costs more. And
Uh-huh.
so, and we try to find ways to make it cost less, but the industry itself is against it because it's more cost or whatnot.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, thank you. That was a great question, Muriel. Thank you. So I'm gonna go to one of my questions here. So how should universities check whether accommodation systems are actually working for the people who use them, not just meeting formal requirements? So how could they check to make sure it's actually working?
I think it really boils down to what I was saying about including real users in the process. So they'll point out gaps that don't work. Specifically, like I was saying, you can follow all the standards, but there will be gaps. So I think that's, you know, the first thing, but I'd be curious to know what others have to say.
I have a question about that though. What about like, do you sometimes feel like that's just extra labor for you though? Like, that's what I'm wondering, like, where that balance of like, should you be, like, maybe the university should like pay the students to come and talk about what they're
Yeah.
experiencing, you know what I'm saying, or
I
something?
agree. In fact,
Punctuation marks.
all of the work that we do at Access Labs with our testers is they must get paid or else we won't do the job. We have to value their work. For too many years, the blind community has been, you know, giving the advice for free and,
Right.
Yeah.
you know, things like that. So we have to value our time, especially if we're a community that is very much under the poverty level. And the vast majority of our community doesn't work and needs income. So that's really important. The thing is that I've always thought of it too, like, okay, maybe it's asking too much of us, but then when people start assuming our needs,
Right.
Yeah.
Worse. Yeah, totally worse. Yeah.
I feel like it's a bit about, for me anyway, it's a bit about culture building. So I'm probably going on a couple of strains here, but I mean, partly it's about building a culture where it's okay to say it's not working.
Mhm.
and where that doesn't get met with backlash or
Right.
resistance.
Yeah.
Because it's not, the work isn't, for me anyway, isn't saying this isn't working for me. The work is all of the aftermath that inevitably unfolds when people are resistant, people are not believing me, to Bonnie's point, just believe, I can tell you this isn't working, really, I'm not making it up. And, because I would really rather not talk to you about this.
Yeah.
So.
Exactly.
This is not part of my job. So I think it's partly that. I think that it's also. So, we don't really talk about ableism on campuses. We don't really acknowledge. And so I think about, and I had this conversation with folks when the Strive task force was launched. I said, we are nowhere in this as people who live ableist harm on campuses every day. It's just not represented. And there's no understanding of the depth of harm that can and does happen every day in classrooms and interactions. And so it's like, it's a little bit about acknowledgement and education and culture building and like, and all of the other things.
Yep.
But until we actually recognize what's going on and talk about it, because we largely don't know ableism as anything other than discrimination. Like, we don't talk about how it works, how it shows up, how it, the networks of beliefs that lead us to these kinds of behaviors that rank and sort people according to ability.
And then stratify.
Yeah, rank and sort and stratify and punish and all of those things.
Yeah.
So it's hard work. And I'm maybe never one of those people who thinks we're ever going to eradicate it. Like, and maybe that's just fatalistic of me at this point in my life, but I feel like we're always going to have this ongoing work because it's not a lot of people's priority.
Yeah.
Which, sorry.
No, go ahead. I was just gonna, go ahead. And then I was gonna just ask her to say what Strive is so that people know.
Oh yeah, you're going to make me Strive.
You don't have to have the acronym, just.
Was the campus climate task force that was struck a couple of years ago to try and really understand and address campus violence and I think it was launched just after
the organizing around.
Yeah, the
Palestine.
organizing around Palestine. I was going to say the beginning of the genocide, and then I thought, well, that's silly because that's hundreds and hundreds of years, thousands of years. So, but it was organized around then, and to try and to address, and they had specific kinds of, they had like 6 areas that they were looking at around like racial violence and anti-Semitism. Campus climate was one particular, but nothing took
On
up
ableism.
disability. Nothing took up it. And I said, like, we're in all of those places, but you're not talking about us anywhere.
That's really a
not
very good
there.
one. Yep. Sorry to interrupt you there.
No, it's all good. I was just gonna say it's interesting that we're not a priority because we are the one minority that anyone can become a part of at any time.
Yeah.
Like,
And the largest,
right?
the largest minority.
And on your point about not being anywhere, like I'm in an EDI class with Apple and we're just not talked about in an EDI class. We're bringing ability up, but it's not been in anything at all yet.
We were never part of equity discussions.
What is EDI?
Oh,
Of course.
equity, diversity.
See, inclusive.
Yeah.
That's yep, that's intense.
Yeah.
Do you want to say something, Simon, or you just
I did earlier, but it's like I'm kind of regurgitating what everyone said, but I think it's important to acknowledge that yes, disabled people are like the biggest minority, and I think there's also lots of intersectionality with different communities, and I still think like that's also not acknowledged.
Yeah.
And I feel like if we did acknowledge that more, it would be maybe easier to talk about disability without it being kind of a touchy topic for certain people or make people uncomfortable. I think if it was something we were actively like thinking of, like maybe you're like, if somebody was doing a workshop on racism, it would be maybe good to talk about how somebody who from a racialized community might also experience additional discrimination based on their disability and talking about that. I think that would maybe make the conversation a bit more open and people would be more willing to learn about it, but I still think there's a lot that needs to be done to get there.
I do want to say that when I work with corporations, I had to think long and hard about how to present accessibility to them because they all agree it's the right thing to do. You know, and you'll get them to agree with that, you'll get a meeting anytime. But start asking about how to do it, how much it costs, it might be a budget line item and all of that stuff. Then they start wondering, you know, is it a good business decision? And so it absolutely is, because what I go around telling them is there's research that shows that Canadians with disabilities represent $55 billion in purchasing power. And imagine if the employment levels, if accessibility was perfect everywhere, employment levels would be at par, which means that $55 billion would probably be fivefold, 6, 7 times that amount. So marketing people are always looking for that last market they can tap into. Well, this is the last ever growing market. How are you gonna do that?
Very good capitalist,
Yeah. Have to talk their language sometimes, you know?
Yeah. But building on Simon, what you were talking about, the intersections between racism and disability, there's a question here from the audience. What unique challenges are your BIPOC peers facing? Obviously, you can't speak for them, but I mean, if you have some sort of things that you want to share about that, and they're asking also about BIPOC organizations, whether they exist in Montreal that are working on disability, if you have any idea.
Well, obviously you can tell I'm a white guy, so there's certain things I'm not experiencing, so I'm not necessarily experiencing like racism, let's say like racial profiling. I'm sure people with disabilities who belong to the BIPOC community experience discrimination in whatever form it comes, and I think that's something that needs to be addressed. But personally, I don't know of any organizations that are BIPOC specific working on disability, but I'm sure there are people, maybe activists from the BIPOC community that are advocating for their experiences. And I think that's an important thing that needs to be done. And it's not even just for the BIPOC community, for a bunch of different communities. I think it's something that needs to be worked on.
Yeah.
One thing I love about the disability justice movement is it's, you know, it was created and it's led by queer disabled people of color. Like it's really a response and intervention to the fact that disability rights movements have been very white, very male dominated. I disrespect to my white male colleagues, but it's been sort of the bane of my existence as an activist that, you know, every white man in a wheelchair is listened to way before I'm ever heard as a white woman even. And there is that definite disability hierarchy. And so that's one of the things that I think that is really, really hopeful about the disability justice movement is, you know, they recognize that, you know, disabled people were not being represented in feminist movements, in Black Lives Matters movements, but also racialized folks are not being represented in disability movements. Like there was just no cross-movement solidarity. Like we did see in the States, in the, did anybody see the movie Crip Camp?
Yes.
Yeah, highly recommend it. And it's such an amazing example of kind of cross-movement solidarity and like the Black Panthers coming together to support disabled activists. And so it's really an amazing, amazing film.
I hope someone in the organizers is noting all of these things. Crip Camp and the podcast.
We indeed are.
Yeah,
I also just wanted to take 1 second to, if I can interject one thing.
Yes, okay, and then I'll ask the last question after.
Yeah, just, I just wanted to point out to everyone that, we saw it across a lot of disabled communities, you know, putting feelers out and asking for panelists. And I found it really, really interesting that we had certain disabilities, certain types of disabilities that came forth more. And also that we ended up with an all-white panel in this case as well, speaking. And that was, I guess, who felt comfortable for whatever reason to speak. And so we ended up with 2 wheelchair users, two sight impaired people, right? And then we have a moderator that is the only kind of odd duck, if you don't mind me saying that, as one myself, in the group, right? And yet, you know, we had a predominantly neurodiverse group of people that were behind the scenes on this. So I just kind of wanted to flag that this was actually about who was stepping up in this case. But it was interesting because we let it happen organically. And I just wanted to speak to that question because we were hopeful for even more diversity, but we're also really thankful that there are certain communities that are stepping up a lot. So
Thank you, Apple. Yeah.
I do, can I just?
Yeah, yeah,
say
of
this,
course.
I actually, I see a lot of, I can't speak to anybody's experiences, I can just speak to what I observe, but I certainly observe that, racialized disabled students are met with a lot more, resistance and anger when they speak up. So I like your point, about folks who feel like they can speak up, and I live a pretty privileged life at this stage, and I always think it's important to leverage that and be willing to speak up because I can. So I think that your point about who feels like they can, who feels like it's okay to speak up is really important to acknowledge.
Yeah. I think it's interesting how, like, you know, to a certain degree, we have trouble being believed, but it is infuriating how much difficulty women of color who are disabled have trouble being believed. Like, they are resisting it. It's not just believe, not just not believe, but they are just like, you must be, you know, looking for something else. Like, take a time out.
Yeah.
Suck it up.
Yeah.
It's infuriating.
Anybody else have something you wanted to say on that before we move to that last question? No? Okay. So this is a question from the audience. What is a moment of joy, connection you have found in your disability justice work that gives you hope?
I mean, I play wheelchair basketball, and it's like, it's the one time where I feel like it's an even playing field, because it kind of is. It's the one time I feel normal. It's the one time I feel kind of like my old self. So that's absolutely a moment of joy, for sure.
Do you guys play here at Concordia?
I wish.
Oh.
No, the chairs are just way too expensive, but I play for SCPA in Montreal. Yeah.
What's Siva?
Centre Intégration de Vie Active. So
Okay.
they do a lot of adaptive sports where you can like rent the equipment, try it out. They do a lot of those things, like paddleboarding. They do sit skiing. They do power chair soccer. They do wheelchair rugby. Sure, like a lot of other things, yoga, stuff like that. Yeah.
Is it located in a specific place, or is it like across the city?
I think their office is based in St. Henry, I want to
Yes.
say. But I practice in like Montreal North. The power chair soccer is down near like Monk Metro. Yeah.
Wow, nice. Okay.
My disability justice moment of joy is when I do my adapted sailing. I also just want to point out that SIVA in the summer, they do a couple outings to the AQVA for sailing and take
AQPA.
Association Québécoise de Voile Adapté.
Aha.
So they'll take SIVA members and they'll take them sailing. But what I like about the adapted sailing is that I'm sailing with other athletes with various different kinds of disabilities. So the founder of the sailing organization in Quebec was a quadriplegic, and he used a sip and puff system, which is like straws, and he would breathe on those straws, and he would control the sailboats and beat other sailors that had the upper body strength. And I met another sailor that has some limb differences, and she's able to beat some of the sailors that have full capacity in their arms. And in my case, I use a joystick like on my wheelchair, and it's amazing to see both adult and young adults and children with disabilities getting to try sailing and having the freedom to be able to move as they want in the sailboat.
Wow. I'm learning a lot today.
Yeah.
David here, I think in an odd way, getting a disability later on in my life after having had a former life of, owning businesses and being a photographer and all these kind of things, in a weird way that my disability has brought some meaning to my life. And I'm been able to find ways to be happy with that. But I think that where I've found the most joy in the sort of disability justice work that I feel like I do every single day of my life is in my office. I'm very proud to say that 90% of my staff is visually impaired, and it's in fact one time we needed to hire someone else, and my staff said, "Hey, David, maybe we need someone sighted." And I have that, and they showed me the filing cabinet. Now we digitized it, so but really what I want to say is because I often have employers and corporations come visit us, and I remember one time an employer came in and he just stopped in his steps and said, "This looks just like any other office." And I said, "Exactly, you got the point. It's not like this is like a disabled office or something, I don't even know what that would look like." And so I was just showing them that staffing an office is not very tricky, and it doesn't take very specialized equipment or anything like that. So that to me was a very happy moment in my life where I felt like I was truly showing it in our actions that we do, and not just saying it. So that gave me a lot of joy.
Wow, that is a joyful moment. What about you, Cynthia?
For me, it's always about the people I've met, just amazing co-conspirators in my work, in my activist work, which has spanned, 30 years now, and post-secondary accessibility activism, sort of broader accessibility, government relations activism, and I've met people I would never have met, and I have learned so much. And I think the most meaningful piece of work that I did was to co-lead development of the accessibility standards in Nova Scotia for education. So from primary right through post-secondary in both the private and public sectors. And that was where I just met incredible co-conspirators. And we worked, gosh, the day that we presented those to government, I walked out of there and I said, that was worse than my doctoral defense. That was 4 hours of being grilled. Even my defense wasn't that bad. Yeah. And so, but it was just an amazing, it was community building. We built community in some really important ways, and it's really sad and funny in some ways because I've been watching the last few days. A terrible government budget has come down in Nova Scotia that has cut millions out of disability. Oh no, it's millions and millions. But I see all of my co-conspirators. The uprising has been amazing. Mm-hmm. It's sort of what Simon spoke to earlier about. We just have to keep coming back at it, right? We make progress, and then they make cuts, and we have to go back at it. And I'm watching this on social media. I'm like, those are all my people. Oh. And so for me, and that's actually what I've missed since I've been in Quebec, because I haven't been here long, and I don't have the same activist communities yet. I'm building community on campus, but it's a really, it's not a small town, small university. Yeah, so it's a really different environment. So yeah, for me, the joy has really been in building those relationships. It's been amazing, and they're enduring because we all live, similar. We've just got similar lived experiences together.
Yeah. Thank you. That was very inspiring to end, but a nice way to end. Thank you so much. I mean, maybe are you going to be? Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, on the community access, I will just say that we fully intended to just open the floor up, maybe push some of the chairs out of the way a little bit more, and reopen the venue in the food direction, encouraging everyone to mingle a little, talk a little bit more, and engage in community. So thank you all so much. Sure, thanks. I'm Apple, so I'm the one that was up here the most, but we also have Bria. We did that. Thank you very much, everyone, for coming out, and we hope that you'll stick around a little while.